I'm always looking for the simplest way to do something, not the most complicated way. And I know that people watch my work like on American Horror Story and think, wow, this is incredibly dense and complex and stuff. But that's not the way mentally that I approached it. I was always looking for the simplest, most direct way to get the audience to understand how the character is feeling in that exact moment. And so I would choose the visual that would put that story point across. And all of that transferred into my professional work, stuff that I still do now. And plus the fact that I also love to do magical illusions. I believe magic and filmmaking go hand in hand. The stage illusions that Georges Méliès did translated seamlessly to motion picture film when he started to incorporate film into stage shows.
We are the
Get Reelisms Podcast.
I am Adam Chase Rani.
And I am Christine Chen. And surprise, we're both filmmakers.
We get into it by sharing secrets, advice, and gossip in filmmaking.
And we even get our other filmmaking friends to share theirs too.
So please, everybody, join us for
an ode
to
filmmaking.
Welcome back to Get Reelisms Podcast, episode 170. My name is Adam Chase Rennie.
And I am Christine Chen, and I'm really excited today to have a special guest that I somehow coerced to be on here. Michael Goi, would you mind introducing yourself, who you are, what you do?
I'm a director and cinematographer, director primarily for the last 10 years, cinematographer for about 38 years, primarily before then. Lately been executive producing on shows as well, and just active in a lot of industry organizations and committees.
Yeah. Could you take us back to the very, very beginning when you had any access to film? What was the first set or moment where you had access to the film industry?
The professional film industry or the indie film industry?
Any
or
of it. I can remember that I touched my dad's VHS camera, and that's what inspired me to start making random stuff.
When I was 7 years old, I went to a friend's birthday party and he had an 8mm projector and was showing digest versions of horror films from the 1930s, like Frankenstein and Dracula, on the wall as part of the birthday party. And it was the first time that I had seen actual motion picture film, 8mm motion picture film. And I realized that it was a series of still photographs that moved into the projector and then turned it into motion when it hit the wall. So that to me was like magic, that you could tell stories with still photos and have them move. And that spurred my interest in getting an 8mm camera myself and start to make my own movies. And because stop motion animation, specifically 3-dimensional stop motion animation, was like the huge inspiration for me. I was a big fan of Ray Harryhausen's work and I used to watch his films. And so all of my initial experiments were stop motion animation with clay models or things like that. And that's how I taught myself really the grammar of filmmaking and how you actually make stories out of images in that way. And it's something that grew over time. By the time I got into my first year of high school, I wanted to make professional movies. To me, professional was 16mm. And I got a used Bolex wind-up camera that this man used to use to shoot fishing films on weekends and stuff. And I would do my own experiments. And I still have that Bolex when
I was
do
going to ask about
jobs. Yeah. I sometimes take out the Bolex and I shoot some footage for the movie or the films. I've used it on American Horror Story. It all goes back to those.
And was your family always supportive of this path that you have for making films, or was it always, it's a hobby?
Yeah, there's a video on my Instagram, which is when I was presenting with an award from the ASC a few weeks ago. In my speech, I made mention of the fact that my parents were both born in California, but were placed in internment camps during World War II. So my love of movies prompted me to tell them that I want to go to Hollywood and I want to make movies. And my mom said, then that's what you should do because you can be anything you want to be. You know, that support Even though there was nothing even remotely filmmaking or even photography in the background of anybody in my family, they supported my desire to be a filmmaker, even if they didn't understand how that pathway was going to work from Chicago. So I just started shooting then and basically never stopped. And for a long time, I think, even when I became a member of the American Society of Cinematographers, and I got nominated for an award one year, and I flew out my dad and my mom to the ceremony. And it was the first time my dad had ever worn a tuxedo when he walked into this ballroom with 1,600 people in elegant dress. And he was like, wow, this is a big deal. And Billy Fraker, who shot Rosemary's Baby, and a bullet came up to my dad and shook his hand. And he said, your son is going to be president of the ASC someday. It was at that moment I realized my parents still thought I was like making movies in the backyard. They didn't know that I'd gotten to this arena of professional filmmaking.
Yeah. Do you remember what was the context for your first film for 16 millimeter? What did you shoot?
I did it because I really love silent movies, and I especially loved Buster Keaton. The first 16 millimeter, large scale 16 millimeter project I did was a tribute to those movies. Though it was filled with stunts, it had in camera effects, it was called The Perils of Patrick, and it had this whole silent movie vibe about it. It had intertitles, and all the situations were based on things that I loved about Buster Keaton and Mac Bennett films of that era. So that was the first project.
How do you see your very early work affecting everything that you've done since then?
I still do the same things. I'm always looking for the simplest way to do something, not the most complicated way. And I know that people watch my work like on American Horror Story and think, wow, this is incredibly dense and complex and stuff. But that's not the way mentally that I approached it. I was always looking for the simplest, most direct way to get the audience to understand how the character is feeling in that exact moment. And so I would choose the visual that would put that story point across. All of that transferred into my professional work. It's stuff that I still do now. And plus the fact that I also love to do magical illusions. I believe magic and filmmaking go hand in hand. The stage illusions that Georges Méliès did translated seamlessly to motion picture film when he started to incorporate film in the stage shows. Case in point, on the show The Rookie Feds, there was a sequence where I was directing where a woman terrorist shooting with a machine gun as she's running across the street to try to get to a car to escape. And then she gets hit by another car. And it's a shock moment. And originally the production thought that was going to be a CGI thing. And I said, there's no CGI here. All we do is we set up the camera, we have her run in the street, turn around and shoot. And then we cut, she goes away. And then we drive the truck with a dummy of her across the frame. Then we drive the truck across again with no dummy on it. And we just use a simple traveling split screen toward her. And when she's going to get hit by the truck, we cut to the dummy and then run the truck for the rest of the frames. But all of these things stem from the realization that film is essentially a two-dimensional medium, and you can get away with things because the mind fills in the gaps. We're going to cut from this to this, and in between, the mind bridges it because it wants to follow the logic of what it's seeing. But today, we seem to have lost that sense of wonder about things that we can do just with the immediate resources we have at hand. There's a tendency to mentally immediately jump into pushing the digital button. Oh, this isn't CGI effective. No, it doesn't have to be. And it's a lot more fun to do it by hand and do it live.
Are there any other examples where people just jump to the conclusion of VFX, but you decided to do practical instead?
Oh, sure. Yeah. All through my work, you'll see a lot of it from everything I've done. So all through my career, when I was shooting the television show Salem, there was a sequence where Jan Montgomery, who plays the witch, is looking into the mirror, and in the mirror, her reflection is of a haggard, ugly witch. And we were going to do all this, and they thought that we were going to green screen the mirror and then shoot them as individual things. I said, what we do is we shoot Janet. She looks the way she is, and the camera starts coming around her. And as the camera's coming around, we have the woman who plays the old haggard witch sitting lying down next to her, and she just sits up. And then we're over Janet's shoulder into the reflection of the old haggard woman. It just doesn't see Janet. And it's simple. And because they're right next to each other, they can perfectly mimic what the other is doing. So it doesn't have to be calculated in a CGI.
Would you say that would be one of your suggestions for filmmakers now, is to try to think outside and do practical stuff before they press the digital button? It would make their filmmaking more interesting. What do you think the benefit is the most from thinking outside of the digital box?
It's going to vary with every individual person, I think. But for me, I love Warner Brothers Looney Tunes. I used to study those cartoons frame by frame, especially the cartoons by Bob Clampett, because nobody animated Daffy Duck the way he did. And when I look at Daffy having a rant or a tirade and I study it frame by frame, the frames are so radically different. Like one frame he'd be like this, and next frame he'd be like this, and next frame he'd be like this. I was like, how the heck did he think that this was going to flow? But it does. So studying motion in that way gave me a sense of what is capable, what is possible in the motion picture medium. And then you see it applied in so many great films, like in Bonnie and Clyde, the editing that Dee Dee did in Bonnie and Clyde, Dee Dee Allen, where she would cut out the entire middle of an action sequence. She just chop out all the parts that don't apply to the action that's happening in the moment. And it gave the film such a tremendous burst of energy. And these things are simple in concept and relatively simple in execution, but your mind has to be open to see it. You have to be able to see it and to recognize that as filmmakers, we can manipulate time, we can manipulate the way something is happening to heighten the experience for the character and subsequently for the audience. So it depends on what your position is, I think, in the filmmaking world. As a cinematographer, certainly this directly applies. As a director, I love being able to have that immediacy on set. But for me, when I'm directing, the number one most important thing is to make sure that I'm getting the performance.
Yeah.
And so that's my concentration. But I know that within the context of that world, I'm introducing this element, which is going to enhance what's happening with the actors.
When you first started, did you already go on the path of, I want to, because I direct, but I now write so that I can direct, but I will always identify as a director first. Do you identify as a cinematographer first or as a director first? In your early career path, was it always to direct? Was it always your ultimate goal, or was it really just to film and be a cinematographer?
Early on, I wanted to be an editor.
Oh, interesting.
Because I loved taking two pieces and putting them together and seeing what the impact of that cut. I still do edit quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's a great discipline. It teaches you about what kind of shots and how many of them you actually think you need to tell the story. So the editing background really helped me, but ultimately I didn't want to spend my entire professional career in a little room by myself, which is why I gravitated toward being a cinematographer. But all of that kind of went hand in hand now, because my mind is always thinking in terms of the jigsaw puzzle of how that sequence comes together. Yeah. And as a cinematographer, I know how to get those pieces to make them fit within that timeline. So it's all of those experiences led me to be the filmmaker that I am. I've also written, but I wouldn't call myself like a writer necessarily. I wrote myself a comedy because nobody hires me to direct comedy. I'd like to direct a comedy, so I wrote myself one. So It's an interesting time right now because I feel like I can be taken seriously with the projects that I bring forward, and I can move the dialogue from things that I do to things that I especially want to do.
And yeah, for what's happening now and throughout your career, what has been the biggest thing that you've done that's been able to continue to push it forward? Because there's going to be, I think, every juncture, there's always times when things are slow, right? Or you don't have the right connections, or to try jump to the next step, you don't know how to do that. What would you say at each of these big pivotal career milestones was what got you to that next step?
Know that I necessarily recognized career milestone when it's happening. In the same vein, like people will ask me, what's your favorite thing that you've done, or what do you think is the best work? I can't really think about that way. I don't analyze what I've done in the context of what viewers would do. People will say, oh, wow, your work on this show, on American Horror Story, for example, was profound and did this and that. And I don't have that same kind of perspective in history as far as my own work goes, because I feel like if you retread your own history, you inevitably start repeating your own history because you know that this worked, did this before and it worked. And that stopped the mental process of discovering new things. So people will ask me sometimes, when did you know that you made it? And honestly, I still feel like every morning I wake up, I'm hoping this is the day that I make it. This is the day that I achieve some sort of creative, artistic, whatever breakthrough that takes me to a new level, but you're never really feeling like you've gotten there.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, an important thing, because I mentor a lot of young filmmakers, and I always tell them it's not fear of failure that causes people to fail. It's fear of success, because everybody fails. All of us fail. Both of you, me, we all fail at some point. And all of us have mechanisms that we use to deal with the fact that we failed, to make ourselves feel better. There are things that we can do to take the sting off of it, whatever. We'll binge watch our favorite show, whatever it is, because all of us fail at some point. But when you succeed, the very definition of success is that you have attempted to do something that you never did before, and it actually worked. All right, that's success. So that in itself is not the plateau. That's not the ultimate goal, because what that does then is opens up two other opportunities that you have never been faced with before, and you have to choose one. You have to choose a pathway, and you choose this way, and let's say it was the right one, and then that opens up two others. So being successful, the very definition of success, means being comfortable with the fact that you're never going to be comfortable, that you're always going to be stepping through doorways that you've never been through before. And that freaks people out. So they retreat into failure. And that's when you start getting the excuses of, oh, I'm sure they were going to choose somebody else for that job anyway, or I'm sure they're looking for somebody with more experience in that field. We say these things to make ourselves feel better about the fact that we stopped ourselves from getting there. So it's fear of success that really stops people. It's easier to retreat into failure because we know how to deal with it, but we don't know how to deal with success. It's an unknown, and you have to be comfortable with that if you're going to be successful.
Do you have any specific moments you can pinpoint where you could have just been okay with failure and been done? And do you know what that moment was? What allowed you to push forward instead?
It's at every point in your career, in your life, really. You have to decide what is the most important thing. What is the most important thing to do? Whether that's creatively, artistically, or in terms of your family or whatever, because family is always number one. I always decide what is the most important thing for me to do. And sometimes it has nothing to do with what I thought I should be doing or I want to do in this moment in time. I really need to do this. I need to move this thing forward. And once you acknowledge to yourself that I need to do the thing that I need to do, it makes it easier to make those decisions, those tough decisions sometimes that people talk about, the tug of war inside their brain. And it boils down to simply, I mean, my daughter was just here in my screening room office. And I remember one time that I was in a meeting with top executives from a film studio. And she came in, she was upset because her toy wasn't working anymore. And I said, okay, probably just needs battery. Hold to change the battery for your daughter's toy. And I said, I had to choose what was the most important thing that I needed to do in that moment. That was the most important thing I needed to do. More important than talking to you in this moment. And she said, I love that. I love that. It's exactly right. So that's what we do. Overthinking that process, I think, leads to confusion and anxiety. And so I don't overthink it. You have your parameters. For me, the basic parameter is family is number one, over and above everything else. And that's not something that I adopted when my work became popular. That's something that I adopted way before I even had a career. You have to do those things that you feel are the things that you are driven to do.
Yeah. In the beginning, when you didn't have a career or it wasn't taking off and stuff, I'm sure, I think, did you always work in Los Angeles or where else were you at?
No, I was in Chicago. Yeah, I started out in Chicago and I was creating a career for myself and doing things like I would shoot really low budget spec commercials for companies and like on Spanish television, because I would see who had the worst commercials on Spanish television and I'd shoot a spec commercial and
Yeah.
they would buy it. And
Yeah.
some of them did. But ultimately, when productions would come into Chicago, I would see if I could get work on them as the fourth string camera department PA or whatever it is. And I worked on a very large production that came into Chicago. But it was a difficult learning experience because there were a lot of things on it that didn't jive with me in terms of safety and things like that. I figured, okay, I'm going to try to make it work from Chicago. If that's what Hollywood filmmaking is like, I don't want any part of that. I'm going to make it work from Chicago. My first 6 features were done when I was based in Chicago still, even though I shot all over the place.
Okay.
Moonstalker, Chains, Hellmaster, all those things. They were shot in different areas, but I was based out of Chicago. But ultimately, I wanted to be the person who brought the movie to Chicago, not the person who was scrambling to be on the crew. And to do that, I had to be in Los Angeles. I had to be where the meetings were and where the executives were.
Yeah. And so, because right now I think I was joking with a friend from the DGA, and we're like, it's like the Hunger Games right now. Things are slow, but there's always going to be lots of periods of time that's like that. Were there times when you felt like, oh, this is it? Like my career is done and I need to find something else to do now. Do you ever come to a point like that during your whole journey?
I don't know that I necessarily take any thoughts that I might have in that direction seriously. But every day it's like a mix of I feel like I'm all spent out, but at the same time, I want to do all these things. So the forward momentum is driven by, I think, different priorities in your life. Like I'm the chair of the Artificial Intelligence Committee for the Motion Imaging Technology Council of the ASC. And we are very active in exploring that technology and the ramifications it might have for professional filmmaking. We've done interviews with a lot of industry professionals and tech developers and stuff like that. Does this mean that I have a huge interest in technology? No. Like I said, I like things really dirt simple, but I do have an interest in things that affect the future of motion imaging and how we tell stories. And so that led me into that aspect of it. At the same time, I'm really interested in film preservation and restoration. I'm in my theater right now. I have a huge collection of movies, including very rare pieces of 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter film And I think it's important to find and preserve these works for future generations to see. So it's all the things that I'm involved in, all the committees that I'm the chair of, that I participate in. I remember my dad telling me when I was young, he said, don't ever become a member of any organization you're not willing to be in charge of. So I go into these places not expecting these organizations to do something for me necessarily, but if I believe in what the mission of this organization is, how can I help that? How can I help that get to where they're trying to go to? And that propels you into areas of the industry that affect certainly your own employment, but also just the well-being of the industry in general as it goes forward and the people who follow you. The reason why I do movie nights in my theater on Saturday nights with my mentees is because a lot of these younger emerging filmmakers have never been exposed to the over 20,000 movies that I have in my collection that I feel are essential viewing. So being able to open that up to them, having them talk with each other about it, and ultimately then having them network with each other about their own personal experiences on things that they're doing gets them into the industry in a way that is more, I think, proactive than sitting around in your kitchen wondering,
What would be your advice for, let's say, somebody who is sitting at home and stressed out because they haven't booked a gig in a while, and so they're worried about money, and then they feel like they haven't moved their career forward in the direction? What do you think? What would you say step 1, 2, 3 should be for them to get back and propel themselves forward?
First of all, that pain is real. That
Yeah.
pain of feeling like you have no self-worth because you haven't worked in 6 months, because you don't have the context to get the job and whatever, that's real. And you acknowledge to yourself that is real. You're not just feeling sorry for yourself. It's a really tough time. What you're going through has validity. But at the same time, you also have to realize that going down the path of extreme self-depression is debilitating to your ability to be the creative person that you want to be and that you want to present yourself as to the rest of the world. So being able to find small creative outlets to exercise your brain in that realm, even though you're in work shutdown mode, is important. And sometimes it's just the photograph that you take on your phone of something that you feel has a significance. Sometimes the way to get out of the monotony of repetitiveness that sucks up your life is to do something as simple as get out of bed on a different side of the bed tomorrow, because everybody probably gets out of bed on those. But if you get out of bed the next morning on a different side of the bed and you just stand there on the floor, you've immediately changed your world. You've broken that chain of monotony and repetition. And then it makes it easier step by step to free up your mind and let the new creative ideas into it. So those are things that we can do for ourselves during periods of work slowdown. It's important to be able to take care of things financially, no matter what you have to do, no matter what job you have to get that actually pays you something, because it's hard to think creatively from a point of financial desperation.
Yes.
And it's not selling yourself out as a creative person if you take a job as a waiter or you drive Uber or whatever you do to survive, because you have to survive in order to be in the game,
Yes.
in order to be able to do these things. So all of that is just about being able to hang on, to be able to be in the game. And the thing is, it's true. The only time that you're definitely going to fail is when you stop trying. When you give up, you're going to fail. It's inevitable because nothing is moving forward anymore. You have no idea if you're going to succeed, but if you don't keep trying to succeed, you know you're going to fail.
Would you enlighten us of some of the things you've had to do to keep the momentum forward, just so that people, because I think there is always this mental block of, yeah, if I take that waiter job, if I drive Uber or whatever, then I'm not a good filmmaker. I'm not an artist or whatever.
Oh, that's baloney, because everything you do is a life experience that you process into the things that you create. It's impossible to be a storyteller when you don't have stories to tell. When you don't have life experiences, no matter what they are, you don't have any frame of reference for being able to describe, film, write about whatever these things. So those life experiences are important. And like for me, in periods where I'm not working, even though, like I said, writing is not the most favorite thing that I do, but when I write in a very targeted way, I don't tend to write. I'm always thinking about what is what am I aiming for? Why am I doing this? Where do I think this is going to go? And that drives a lot of my choices of what I do, and certainly when I sit down to write. Like I won't write something if I don't know where I'm going to take it. Even if that particular company doesn't end up producing that script, I have to have a target. And so I write it with this company in mind, with this kinds of things that they do in this campaign. And it gives me a starting point then. And that's where it takes off to. But the important thing is really to do it. It's very easy to talk about stuff, how you have to keep dreaming big and stuff like that. Yeah, that's fine, but dreaming is not enough. You really have to be a doer. You have to be somebody who actually does what they dream about. And that's what makes you then a valuable filmmaker to producers and to the industry, is when you have that vivid imagination and you actually do it. That's the people that they want to hire. So keeping yourself vital during times like this and stuff. And the thing is, you analyze a time like this, you start to look at the industry and you say, okay, throughout the entire history of the motion picture business, there have been down times like this. What was the thing that generated income for studios and things like that? You look at the Great Depression. During that period of time, what did they do? Universal Studios went to produce a bunch of really low budget horror movies. People contracted and they went to a genre that they knew could still attract an audience, that didn't require huge, expensive stars. And they bring innovative concepts to that work. That's what you do. You analyze what has happened before, and then you go into that direction where there's going to be a need.
It's interesting you say that. It feels like that nowadays, like what you and Christine are saying, is that we're dangerously close to a recession, whether or not you blame the current administration running our country or whatever. It still feels like there's that emptiness. Do you feel that studios have an obligation to produce more low budget films that kind of gives a little more freedom for independent filmmakers and other filmmakers alike to finally have that vision come true? Is that the problem? Or because it just seems like studios push large budget films and put all their eggs in one basket, it feels like it's economically way more efficient to produce lower budget films.
Studios are going to serve the agendas, the business model that they've agreed upon is what they need to do in order to be successful as studios. Right now, most of the studios are controlled by huge corporations whose main business is doing something other than making movies. The filmmaking end of it is a very small component of that, but it's still got to be successful within that framework. I think we're in a period of contraction now where a lot of the huge mega million budget films are being scaled back. They're looking to make things in a smaller way, but still make a big impact. They're looking for ideas that are creatively a little more out of the box. Some people ask me, how do you direct children so well? Because I've directed a lot of things with kids. And then they said, isn't that very difficult? And I said, no, it's really simple, because kids will go along with anything that's cool. They don't have the rules in front of them that adults have built up over years. Oh, I can't do this or I won't do that. And for kids, as long as it's cool, they'll go with it. And when you get into times like this, every studio that's looking to remake themselves is looking for what's cool. What's going to hit the zeitgeist? What's going to make an impact with the audience that they're trying to reach out for? Not necessarily even the audience that they used to have, but the broader, newer audience that's looking for content and stuff like that. Do you have that, what they're looking for? Do you have that vision? So It's, I think creatively what we're looking at, as with every time where there's contraction going on in the motion picture industry, is we're going to see a lot of creative work come out of it. We're going to see new people come up through the ranks and excel. And that's the thing I think that ultimately you have to keep in mind while you're going through this depressing time of trying to establish yourself, trying to get work, trying to figure out what the next step is. There's got to be a little bit of an acknowledgement of the industry the way that it was is gone. And trying to chase after what's gone is just eating up the time that you could be spending
Yes.
redirecting your thinking in a different direction.
Question: what non-film interest or past job that you had to do that you feel like added a very fun experience to your storytelling?
I don't know. I have a bunch of varied interests. Certainly one of them is trains. It's been well publicized that I jackhammered all the cement around our house and I put in steel rail and I built trains that we could ride around our house. That was motivated by the fact that growing up relatively poor meant that I never really had a train set when I was a kid, and I always wanted to have a train, so I made my own railroad. So these things that inspire my imagination, that turning the cement in my backyard into an Asian garden with a koi pond. I just sit there at 2 o'clock in the morning and watch my fish swim around and then jump on my train and take a ride around the house. These little things that you do that may seem offbeat and stuff are the things that inspire you. For some people, it's making the perfect souffle or breeding the perfect rose or whatever it is. And that's all valid because it keeps your creative juices flowing. There was one young woman who was a PA on a show I was directing, and I was making my way around the back of the sets where I thought nobody was to the bathroom very quickly. And I saw there was a work light on the floor. And as I was passing, my shadow was really big. And I took 2 seconds to make a little shadow flying across the thing. And then I went to the bathroom. And then she told me later, she said, "You didn't see me, but I was tucked away in the corner there. And I saw you when you were passing by that light and you did that." And she said, "I was thinking, oh my God, he's always thinking creatively and you may not realize it in that moment, but you will find yourself bringing back that recollection and that moment in how you approach things." I remember vividly, there was when I was in Chicago, I was in a car with a bunch of my friends, and there was a woman standing with a laundry basket waiting for the bus. And the sunlight was hitting this gleaming building with a lot of glass on it. And it was almost like she was backlit by this shaft of light. And it was only for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and none of my friends saw it. And really, not a month has gone by in my life, and this was like 40 years ago, over 40 years ago. Not a month has gone by where I haven't thought of that moment in that woman and that gleam of light. But you never know when that spark of inspiration is going to come to you, and how profound it's going to be.
Yeah, it seems like you open yourself up to that, right? You open yourself up to even doing like the childhood things that you've always wanted, like building a train and stuff like that. If you just allow that to pass through you, it's almost like you're giving a creative validity, for lack of a better term, but like you can have these creative juices flow through any direction that you can possibly go in, because at the end of the day, we're all storytellers, right? Like even from camera to costume, you got to find inspiration. You got to find yourself to work in all of these things. So allowing yourself to have that childlike wonder is, I don't know, that's the impetus of creativity.
That's what you're saying. Yeah, it's exactly that sense of wonder. You need to retain that sense of wonder and what it does for you and how it motivates you. And I always tell people, because I love job interviews. Everybody who knows me knows that I love job interviews. It's my favorite thing in the industry to do, is interview for a job. And when they said, "Why is it your favorite thing?" I said, because there's no pressure, because I don't even have the job yet. So it's all about me and what I'm thinking in terms of this script that they gave me and how I would approach it and stuff like that. And I hear all of the barriers and the walls come up on people when they say, yeah, what if you don't have the experience they're looking for or whatever, blah, 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 blah. I can't think that way because the job interviews for me are way too much fun. It's much more fun than actually doing the job in most cases because you don't have to worry about budgets or schedules or lack of equipment or whatever like that. All
Yeah.
you have to think about,
Open.
yes, is what this is and the possibilities of this. And I love that aspect of it. It's when you think about a job interview, you have to think a little bit from their perspective, what are they looking for? And it really boils down to two things. Do they like you and do they trust you? And that supersedes experience. That supersedes everything. They want to know if they like you and they trust you. In order for them to determine that, they have to know a little bit about you and what drives you beyond the resume. People always start reciting their resume when people ask, what have you been up to? Oh, no, I did this. And I always tell them whatever's happening in my life in that moment that really drives my passion. That's what I talk about. At one point, it was about my train. I built a train around my house. Or at another point, it was that I found a place with the perfect Chicago deep dish pizza.
Right, because I
I'm
love
keeping that a
pizzas.
secret for me because that's my private oasis to get away to. It's those things when you start to talk about what really drives your passion, and it may not have anything to do with the film industry, but it has to do with the thing you really feel deeply about. That makes you memorable to them. That gives them an insight into who you are and what you do. And I've talked about the fact that me talking about my train, which I just built at that time, the insight it gave that production company was that, yes, I'm a dreamer. I thought about this, but I actually did it. So I'm somebody who accomplishes those things. And those are the qualities that they were looking for that project. They wanted somebody with a big imagination, but who could actually figure out how to. And that's what we do when we express what's important to us.
If you couldn't ever work in the film industry again, what would be an alternative industry that you would be interested in?
Like I said, I love film restoration and preservations. Really, what I want to do when I retire from production is I want to be the Indiana Jones of film preservationists. I want to travel around the world and climb through dusty attics and find a piece of film that hasn't been seen in over 100 years
Yeah.
and restore it. That's my number one interest. But aside from that, there's so many other things that I like. I love to scuba dive, and a lot of times with productions and stuff, it's time intensive, and I don't have as much time to pursue something like that. That's something that I would love to do. You're probably figuring out from this podcast, I tend to go on a stream of consciousness kind of thing and see where it takes me. And there's a bunch of things that, especially with the status of the world now, I've talked with my wife. Politics, am I deeply interested in politics? Maybe not necessarily. Am I deeply interested in the way that society and the country is going? And do I think it's right or wrong? And is there a way that I can affect that in a positive way? Possibly. Does that mean I have to run for a public office? Possibly. So these things are driven by, sometimes my wife will tell my sons, are you going to be like daddy and go out and save the world? He wants to know how much this is influencing them.
What do they want to do?
My oldest son, who's 17, he wants to study business and engineering.
Okay.
That's where his mind goes. My middle son, my son, who's 14, is interested in biological, like underwater studies, in addition to gaming and kind of like the methodology behind gaming. My daughter, who's just turned 5, I think she's going to be the singer, dancer, actress in the group. I see that coming, but yeah, that's what their interest is. I don't push my kids to join the motion picture industry. I think maybe dad makes it look like a lot of hard work. So maybe there's not that interest anyway. So they see certainly how much time I put into committees and into helping industry objectives.
Have they ever been on set?
They've visited a few times, not a huge amount of times, but a few times, enough to understand what it is that I do.
Yeah.
A lot of waiting, a lot of.
There's not a lot of waiting on the shows that I direct.
I've heard about that.
I like to keep
Yes.
things moving. I don't believe in working long hours. I've never had a single day on shows that I've directed go over 12 hours. I don't believe in beating up the crew. I think there has to be a reality about how much work can be accomplished in a day. And then you organize your day to be the most efficient way that you can get that day done. But sometimes the atmosphere becomes one of an assumption of a 14 or 16-hour day. And that's not where my head is at. If I can get the day done in 10 and a half hours, I'm going to do it. And I'm always looking to turn out the best show or the best movie that I can. But it's equally important to me that the people who are working on that show, that their safety, their health, and their well-being is respected in that process.
Yeah. So I think that's a very important point. From your years of doing this and being this career, if you could identify 5 tips for anybody who wants to come into the industry or whatever, what would they be? Or life in general, what would be your biggest advice that you tell your mentees or whatnot?
One of them would certainly be you have to have a life. As we're saying, you have
Love
to
it.
have experiences, real experiences that you can translate into your art. If you've only visited the Grand Canyon through virtual reality goggles and you've never actually been to the Grand Canyon, you have no idea. You have no idea what the Grand Canyon is actually like.
Yeah.
So having those real experiences, I think, is really important. I think helping each other as we go through these processes is important. A lot of times people feel this intense feeling of competition with other people who are on the same kind of level, competition for jobs or competition to meet this person or that person. And it's the reality is that a lot of times whoever gets selected for a particular position has nothing to do with what you did or did not say during your job interview. One of the producers may have a nephew who's looking for a position in that department and stuff like that. And then when you find out you didn't get it, you take it as a personal failure. That's like a senseless waste of brain power to dwell on those things. You don't have any control over any of those things. I think finding mentors in the industry is really important. Finding people who are actually doing the things that you want to do is important, because film school is really terrific. It gives you access to equipment that you'd otherwise have to rent. It gives you access to crew people who you would otherwise have to pay for. It gives you an environment where you can make mistakes. And that's a big thing, is you want to make your mistakes and make big ones. In film school, you should so many film projects in film school and messed up every single one of them in different ways, trying things. But by the time I got to shooting a show like American Horror Story, I had no fear of trying something that nobody else had ever done before, or doing things that nobody had ever tried, pulling the processing on the film 3 stops, and then putting it back in the bath and forcing the processing 3 stops. Things that I felt would work. I never had any qualms about trying. So you can only do that if you go into it without fear and with building up your knowledge of how things work as you go.
Yeah.
I don't know how many tips that is so far.
It was like 4, I think.
The important thing is to actually do it, to do
Yeah.
it and not talk about it. If you've got a great idea for a screenplay, write the screenplay. Don't talk about it.
Yep. Agreed. 100%. Just fucking do it.
I do. It is fascinating to me. I really wish I was trying to find the name of this article, but we were talking about film preservation, and I watched the Beatles documentary on Disney not too long ago. It was by Peter Jackson. He took all the footage of making Let It Be, I think, and in the process of making that album, had tapes on tapes and recordings of so many things, and Peter Jackson was able to go through and restore them. And the article that I'm talking about, I think it was Vanity Fair a long time ago, and I can't find it, but there was this interesting thing about it where they said that AI could lead in film restoration. And I never thought about AI in that way of restoring things like that. But I have seen on TikTok a few times where I would see like a certain scene of a film, and it would be like super bright and super like wild. And in the caption, it said that it was all made by AI. It was restored. This whole scene was recolored and restored from AI. What's your take on this? AI feels like it's a tool that's always evolving, right? So is there like a pursuing in like not replacing the work of filmmakers with AI, but utilizing it as a tool for maybe not just only film restoration, but for storyboarding and planning like shot lists and stuff like that? I feel like there's so much given with AI. How do you feel about AI and the direction that's going in? Does it feel like it's going to take our jobs, or is it more, it's a tool that we can utilize?
Like I said, I'm the chair of the AI committee for the Motion Imaging Technology Council. We just had a segment for the ASC Masterclass on AI where I brought in Eleonora Agropoulos, who's an AI content creator. She's built her entire brand and her career on artificial intelligence in the recent years. And I paired her with Caleb Deschanel, the cinematographer of The Black Stallion and The Right Stuff, all these fantastic movies, so that they could work together with Caleb's vision of what he wanted to see in this New York street in the 1890s and the quality of the character that he's placing into that environment. It's first, I think we're getting past the whole burn down Frankenstein's castle attitude about AI because that's not productive. There are certainly risks and things to watch out for, and there are certainly ethical questions that have to be addressed as this goes forward. Different organizations are tackling different aspects of the issue. Some are concentrating on trademarks and copyright and things like that. Others are dealing with creative rights and how do you preserve the original artist's intentions. But ultimately, what's going to happen with AI is that the commotion is going to die down probably around the time that there's so much AI in our everyday lives. We take it for granted, like we are now taking for granted the internet. The internet didn't exist until in recent history, and it's revolutionized everything. But it's boiled down to a little mild roar now. AI, the furor is going to boil down again. How much relevance it has to the professional motion picture industry, the motion picture industry is figuring out. One of the things we talked about a year and a half ago in our committee is for an AI algorithm to be taken seriously for motion picture production, it has to be at least 4K, which none of them were at that time. They were 1080 or 720. It has to have predictable repeatability. It can't spit out a completely different image, even though you feed the exact same algorithm, the exact same prompt. It comes out with something completely different. The movie industry can't work that way. We have to work on predictable repeatability. So these issues are being worked out, but the important thing is to understand what it is, what it's capable of. And I think the big takeaway about the session that last Friday at the ASC is that everybody got to see just the amount of work and skill and craft it's necessary to be able to use that tool for a very specific. And this is a conversation that James Cameron and I have fairly repeatedly, is that AI is not going to make a mediocre filmmaker or somebody with no vision. It's not going to make them a great filmmaker. It's not going to make them Orson Welles all of a sudden, but it can help a really great, creative, inventive filmmaker take their work farther. It can help refine that vision, but it takes a lot of effort still. And you have to have a great deal of knowledge of, especially about prompting, especially about what are the particular quirks in this AI as opposed to this one, where it will help process this, but it will just reject this aspect of it. All of that takes a lot of study and knowledge. So it's going to be a tool. It's going to be a tool the way we've adopted tools in the past. You know, when we went from black and white to color film, ultimately we discovered, okay, some subjects are more effective in black and white and some subjects are more effective in color. When we picked up sound, the initial talkies were all just like headshots of people saying words. And then they found that that's not enough for the audience. We want our visual storytelling back. So they had to figure out how to incorporate visual storytelling into being able to have sync sound. When we came up with digital motion picture cameras as opposed to shooting film, ultimately we discovered that film is still better. In my personal opinion, I still
Yeah.
love film. So all these things have their process of evolution, and ultimately we find what their worth is. Individually, as creative people, we will find that, okay, yeah, AI can really enhance this and give us this great. And some filmmakers are like, I just want to shoot this simply with a lens and an actor and a camera. And all of that is valid. It's entirely valid. It'll become a matter of choice.
Oh my God. This has been awesome. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're a very busy person, and I really appreciate that you took the time to just chat with us about your process, your journey. And
You can thank my wife, Gina, because I don't do many things on Sundays because it's family time. But I tell you, having Gina, and that's, I guess, my last piece of advice for people listening is that having a significant other who really understands and supports you. Nobody makes it into this industry alone. You need that one family member, that very close friend, and it's that person who's always going to be your voice of reason and support. And it's really important. Sometimes it's small. I was saying there was one time where I missed an opportunity for what would have been like a game-changing thing in my career. And Gina came in with cookie and a cup of tea for me, and she put it down. She gives me, here's the cookie for you. Keep fighting.
love that.
Do you got anything else, Christine, that you wanted to
I think we touched everything.
basically got everything in?
Yeah.
Thank you again for your time, Michael. Yeah, that's been the Get Reelisms podcast, ladies and gentlemen. You know what time it is. Some great housekeeping. GetReelisms.com. Pick up your film books, pick up your hats, pick up your tees like these. We also have books that Christine's holding on to. Ladies and gentlemen, pick it up today. And again, thank you so much, Michael. This has been an honor.
I learned a lot. Yeah.
Come back on the pod. You text us, you message us.
He's never again.
We're not doing this ever again, but we would love to have you come back, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your knowledge, for teaching, and for just perspective. I always find that perspective is the part that keeps me going in this industry, and knowing that I'm not alone in a lot of the feelings that I have during the hard times like what we're facing right now. Remember to have a life.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate ya. We will see you next time. Until then, keep making films. Never stop making movies, y'all. Thank you so much.
Make movies.
Bye.